The B-52 is a U.S. Air Force legend for a reason. Here is the story of this bomber. America's Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, sometimes referred to as the Buff, has been around for a long time. As one of America's 3 heavy payload strategic bombers and one of only 2 bombers capable of deploying nuclear weapons, the mighty Buff represents the nation's nuclear triad's most prominent airborne leg. If the world were going to end in nuclear hellfire, the B-52 would be right in the thick of it. But this massive aircraft isn't relegated to apocalypse duty. In just the past 2 months, B-52s have been dispatched to fly long-range deterrence missions, from the US to the Middle East and back, meant to remind Iran that America's bombers can strike anywhere in the world without breaking a sweat. B-52s participate in conventional strike missions with great aplomb, using their significant range and massive payload capacity to deliver ordnance of all sorts, from unguided bombs to strategically placed naval mines. In short, wherever there's a fight, you can count on the B-52 to be up for it. In today's world full of sleek and stealthy fighters and increasingly intelligent drones, the old Buff may seem like a relic of the past, but this flying dinosaur still has some pretty impressive tricks up its sleeve. B-52. It was designed in a single, Dayton, weekend. Boeing's original design for a long-range, heavy payload strategic bomber shared a number of traits with the bombers that had come before it, particularly in the engine department. Their B-52 design called for the use of 4 massive turboprop engines, despite the introduction of pretty inefficient jet engines some 10 years prior. Jet engines, at the time, were just seen as too fuel-hungry to offer the range this new bomber would require. But when Boeing presented their design to U.S. Air Force Colonel Pete Worden one Friday afternoon, he told them to get rid of the props or he'd reject their proposal outright. With the future of military aviation and a whole lot of money on the line, Boeing's design team said they'd be back on Monday and proceeded to lock themselves in a hotel room in nearby Dayton, Ohio to get to work. Somehow, Boeing's aeronautical designers George Schirrer, von Blumenthal, Maynard Pennell, Ed Wells, Art Carlson, and Bob Whittington managed to design a new bomber based on Worden's notes, and they returned with a 33-page proposal for what would become the B-52. They had even managed to build a scale model of the design using parts they purchased from a local hobby store. The first B-52 would take to the skies just 4 years later. Little did they realize, their hurried creation was one of the most forward-reaching aircraft designs of the era. Essentially, they discovered the perfect form of the subsonic jet, Michael Lombardi, Boeing's corporate historian, said. Airbus, Boeing, any other company, it's the basic form they follow. B-52s shot down 2 enemy fighters in Vietnam. The B-52 has been in service for so long that it used to have a tail gunner just like the bombers of World War II. Today, the U.S. uses fighter escorts to deter or defend against attacking fighters, but the mighty Buff was still shooting down bad guys as recently as the Vietnam War. 2 U.S. Air Force B-52Ds scored kills against Vietnamese MiG-21s in December of 1972, with the final kill taking place on Christmas Eve. The air war over Vietnam was tougher on American forces than many realize today, and more than 30 B-52s were shot down by enemy aircraft throughout the conflict. When tail gunner Airman First Class Albert Moore spotted an incoming MiG while aboard his aircraft called Diamond Lil, survival was less than assured. If Moore couldn't down the fighter with his .50 caliber machine gun, being shot down was a real possibility. When the target got to 2,000 yards, I notified the crew that I was firing. I fired at the bandit until it ballooned to 3 times in intensity, then suddenly disappeared from my radar scope at approximately 1,200 yards, 630 low. I expended 800 rounds in 3 bursts.